Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Fireside Chat. I'm your host, Tyler Simons, and I am the head of customer success at Fullcast, which is a go-to-market planning and execution platform. So today we're going to talk about process optimization. I think this is something that, Charles, you're passionate about, but also I'm secretly passionate about it. And I've struggled with starting from nothing to trying to learn about it. So this is something really going to be a really interesting conversation today, not just for me, but for everybody else.
Yeah.
So Charles, why don't you give everybody an introduction, who you are and what you're doing?
Absolutely. Thanks, Tyler. Thank you for inviting me to this. So hi, everybody. My name is Charles Chen. I'm the Vice President of Sales Operations for ACV Auctions. ACV Auctions is a 5-year-old company. We are United States' largest online digital auction platform from car dealership to car dealership. We auction way north of 500,000 cars a year, and we handle the transportation, titles, arbitration, delivery of the car, and all that stuff. And the whole idea is about transparency, right? We do this differently than traditional auctions. We have vehicle condition inspectors inspect every car, full condition report, and it's a 20-minute sprint auction. Imagine getting online, jumping in as a buyer. You have a 20-minute sprint to bid for these cars, and that's what we do. My background before this was not in this at all. I spent a little bit of time at Amazon, but 12 years at Microsoft. Before that, I was with General Electric, 4 years with JP Morgan Chase as a retail banking officer. And before that, I was with Ford Motor Company as an engineer. And back to ACV Auctions. My department, I lead 3 different groups: sales analytics, sales excellence, and systems and tools. And it's really a privilege to be teammates with my ACV colleagues and have the opportunity not just to serve them, but serve the automotive retail industry this way.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Are you is it a Six Sigma? Is it like a black belt or whatever they call it?
Six Sigma has a few certification levels, right? Green belt, black belt, and master black belt. It gets more and more advanced and much more arduous. So 2015, while I was with Microsoft, I earned my master black belt certification in Six Sigma. And
See, I think this will be interesting. We want to tie it into it because I think this is also like a career piece to this, and why might somebody care about doing and going through this Six Sigma thing? But we'll kind of weave that in as we have the conversation. I think where I really want to start here is convincing people why they should care about process optimization, right? And so we kind of set up this perfect scenario of okay, we've got this huge ARR goal, which everyone tends to have. And they're like, we got to grow really fast. And the typical method might be to hire a lot of people, put a lot of bodies at this to go and sell and kind of just try to figure it out.
Right.
But I'm curious from your perspective, maybe hiring people isn't going to cut it, right? And how do you think process optimization can help us get there to this huge, audacious ARR goal?
Now that is a challenge that I think any for-profit company runs into, right? We want to hit revenue goals, but hiring and slamming bodies to it is not an option, right? So when we think about, let's just put this in the perspective of sales. Sales motion has a natural art to it. Is 90% activated by people. We're not an assembly line, but there's certain things about sales. It's no different than you cooking or you're driving to a destination. As a series of premeditated actions trying to achieve an outcome. And that's what sales is really at the highest level. Of course, there's art to it and there's a human touch to it, especially that interaction with the customer that needs to be glorified and amplified. But at the end, when we're talking with customers, we're trying to achieve an outcome and echo with them that benefits both ends. So when we think about how do we achieve an annual revenue goal without adding body to it, I would recommend doing this. Take a step back and say, when we're looking at the current sales motion, is it as efficient enough Can it be more efficient and can it be more effective? They're two different things. They're two different things. Efficient means, can I do more of the same sales cycle with the same amount of people? Can I increase my throughput? Effective is when I'm about to seal the deal, a key conversion points in that sales process. Do we do the right things at the right time? An example I can bring up from many years ago when I was running a big program to improve global telesales revenue. Telesales, imagine a telesales motion. You have 20 plus telesales centers, right? Calling customers, selling SaaS solutions. How many leads can each one of these telesales executives handle per day? Let's just use a number as 20. I cannot disclose everything I ran, but what we found out is that is the part about efficiency.
Yeah.
Are we sealing that 20? But what we learned when we deep dive into that sales process, very quickly we found out a big chunk of what they do when they have the disposition, call the customer, have a chat, and disposition each lead. There's motions in there that we need to automate to give time back. And that's exactly what we did about the efficiency piece. We actually re-engineered the platform in deep partnership with my former engineering buddies that ended up giving them about 15 to 20% time back per day, because all that manual part they need to do pre-sales and post-sales, it was automated as much as possible. So 1 out of every 6, we gave back about 15% time back per day, right? That's one part. So that's efficiency. Yep. But the other part about effectiveness was this. If we simplify a sales motion, you have leads coming in, you got to convert those leads to opportunities. Shepherd that through. You got to make sure those opportunities became a win. And then what is the average deal size? If you multiply that from left to right by the people you have and how many days a week they work, you can predict revenue, right? So leads per agents per day, that was the first piece I talked about. That was efficiency. But the next thing we talked about was effectiveness. Out of every lead, out of 100 leads that come in, how many actually become an opportunity? And what we deep dive, we found out if we just hold everything constant, we can fundamentally change that conversation we have with the customers and improve the effectiveness of the conversation that result in a higher percentage leads becoming an opportunity. The actual number I can actually quote was, prior to we did dive into that project, lead conversion rate was 7.4%. After we were done, it was 13.5%. Everything else held the same. We didn't add people. We didn't actually change the lead quality, but we changed the way we have that customer conversation that was much more effective. That resulted in an 82% increase from the base on lead conversion rate. So these are examples what I mean by effectiveness and efficiency without adding headcount. Hopefully that answered your question.
I think so. So I think what's interesting here is, coming back to our original example, right? Like we're got this big ARR goal, people aren't going to cut it. So we got to look at our process, right?
Yeah.
And to do that, we need to focus on two things: efficiency or effectiveness, or effectiveness,
ideally,
right?
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where would somebody start? Because there's going to be processes that exist, and you and I had a conversation before this, and we kind of talked a little bit about some as-is process stuff. So I think that's kind of where I'm headed, is just like, I want to know, like, really, where do you start to understand what the as-is process is? And if you've got any like tips or tricks to like help everybody kind of figure out like how to document that, or like start to unpack how that works today.
Yeah, I think Tyler, I think you will probably have experienced this, and I know a lot of our colleagues and friends who's listening to this Fire Chat have experienced in the past. How many times we're in the meeting talking about the problem? Let's just say a sales issue that's supposed to be addressed by a sales, that's currently being actuated by a perceived repeatable process every day, right? But once you dive in, assuming that no one has a process map, or even the simplest form on the screen, once you dive in, you realize everybody's talking about a different component of the elephant. the conversation goes everywhere. We cannot bring it together, right?
Yeah.
We cannot center the conversation on really going through the process together and go, where is the Achilles heel of this sales motion that's causing all this leakage or all these leads falling off the cliff and all that stuff? The thing I try to do is, instead of jumping into these kind of conversation without prep, me as a facilitator needs to do some prep before that, or come in with a framework to really facilitate this. And I think this is where the Six Sigma certification leading through actual project training and coaching, that part did add value here. So typically what I would do is, don't rush, don't like jump into solutions. Start our first meeting with the critical stakeholders in the call. What is the outcome we're trying to achieve, and how do we measure that? Do we have a metric to measure that? Because if we can measure, do we really know if we made a difference? Spend time defining what the outcome is. Once we know that outcome, we are already talking about something pretty nebulous and centering it in.
Could you say, sorry, I just quick question. Could you just always, like, I feel like the default to everyone is like, well, our outcome is ARR.
Okay.
Like, do you think that that's always like an easy default answer, and you feel like maybe everyone needs to dig a little bit deeper into the actual outcome?
I recommend we do at the beginning of every meeting, as much as sensibly reasonable.
Yeah.
Recenter everybody's mental picture on, is ARR our focus? Is revenue about our focus? If our company offer multiple products, is it every ARR, or is it these two product lines that's how should I say it? That's carrying 80% of our ARR. You see where I'm going with that, right? Just be a little bit more narrow, because those two product lines, they may have their own sales motion, and the problem, the inefficiency and the ineffectiveness of those sales motions could be different or could be the same. I'm not making assumptions, but narrow the scope so the conversation is pointed, and we ensure the conversation is always pointing to the outcome, right?
Yeah.
So I haven't answered your question. So back to, how do we start? I would say, now we agree on the outcome. A very simple way, the key thing is alignment of the people on this call. These are critical stakeholders. Don't go crazy. What I've seen a lot in the past is, we're not even sure what the outcome is, and someone did a really intense swim lane diagram. Imagine how that conversation goes. It's going to go really messy, right? Right, Tyler?
Yeah.
Agree on the outcome. The simple approach, and as a facilitator, this is what I need to do. Go, hey folks, where does this sales motion start? When does this sales motion end? Put the bookends of the process there. And then just define the middle 5 to 7 steps. I'm very, very specific about 5 to 7. This is about alignment. This is not about detailed issues yet. For each of those 5 to 7 steps, do we all agree these are the motions? If we do agree with it, for each process step, do we have inputs and outputs for each process step that's unique? And who are the stakeholders who provide the input and consume the output? The reason why we're doing this, and then we can see the interconnectivity of all the stakeholders as we actuate the process.
Yeah.
The dependencies. Do the fundamentals of that before we so eagerly want to jump into a very intense swim lane diagram that I don't advocate doing upfront at all. Start there. Start there.
You don't want to set a world record for the longest and largest swim lane diagram.
No, that doesn't, because like you heard me say earlier, right? Sales is human.
Yeah.
Sales is human. Human alignment, human agreement, human commitment to the sales process, even is a less optimal sales process, but if everybody's committed to it, it has a much bigger impact than the perceived perfect sales process that we all have a different viewpoint and we don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
So do you find that the doing like a swim lane diagram set tends to work the best? And the reason I ask this is, we get really into the policy side of things, which are like the rules of the road, right? The process of like going from point A to point B is getting in your car, turning the
Yeah,
keys,
yeah,
putting into reverse, taking those steps towards getting to point B. But then there are rules of the road that we have to follow, like, oh, stop sign or red light, we've got to stop. And those are kind of policies.
yeah,
The policy world, we've just spent a lot of time with our customers just documenting that in like a Word doc or Google Docs or Confluence or whatever it is. And it's very wordy. And I'm thinking process probably ends up being a little bit better in those classic diagrams that you see with the squares and the circles and
yeah,
the
yeah,
interconnectedness, rather than like writing out like a 3-page document
yeah.
on this is what our process is. I mean,
I
is
agree.
that a fair assumption?
That's very fair. That's very
Yeah.
fair because the word, when we see word, it's very hard to connect that mentally to the verb and the motions. Immediate mentally have a concrete image. Okay, this person is doing this, and this is the outcome before we get to the next steps. It's
Yeah.
very hard to do that. I think the detailed Word document can is sometimes needed, but not in the absence of a consumable process map that people can reference back and forth. They go, oh, this is the detail. This is what you mean. I think they complement each other very well and use them at the right time. One thing you did mention, you did we both talked about a detailed swim lane. There's one thing I do want to clarify. When I talk about that simple approach that I mentioned earlier, right? Define the bookends, the
Yeah.
middle 5 or 7 steps.
Yep.
For each step, what are the inputs, outputs? Who supplies the input? Who consumes the output for every step? That is very, very powerful for alignment across the stakeholders. But there's one part of that process that's missing, that swim lane will add value, but the swim lane should be done in subsequent of that. Here it is. Because when you define 5 to 7 steps, you really don't see the details, the rework, the grittiness in the sales process. We're supposed to build a customer, invoice the customer. They don't invoice. What is the next step? Who owns the next step and follow up? That doesn't show up in the 5 to 7 step. Simple alignment decision, right? So a swim lane diagram adds value, but it adds tremendous value is when you're really deep diving to find the gritty, sandy spots in the process that you want to align the stakeholders to go fix. The process, the approach I mentioned before, that bookends, 5, 7 steps in between, that is for internal alignment.
Mm-hmm.
Deep problem solving comes from the swim lane diagram. Hopefully that makes sense.
That does. I think it does. Yeah. I don't know anything about process, so I
You
just
know,
make stuff up.
the funny thing that you say that, but you actuate processes every day. The way you brush
Yeah.
it, there's a sequence to that.
It's true.
You drive to restaurants, order food. By the time you pay, that entire cycle is a process. We just do it so automatically. It's not. It no longer needs to be intentional. But sales motions are very intentional,
Yeah.
and I'm not advocating that we need to stipulate every step in the process. This is not an assembly line. Sales is not. Sales is 99% human based, but there's critical points in the process that we can be more effective. There's mundane parts of the process we should automate for them so they can focus more time to sell. Yeah.
All right. So we got our 5 to 7 steps.
Yeah.
And everyone's kind of aligned. There's a problem that exists. I think it's a nebulous problem in our examples here. We haven't really identified what it is, but we've done the outcome. We've got the 5 to 7 steps. There's a problem. I think what would be helpful for us is to figure out, like, identifying either components that, well, actually the 5 to 7 steps are the components that lead up to an outcome, right? So how do we use this to then really dive into a specific problem, or to solve it, or to like go after that efficiency gain or effectiveness
No,
gain?
that totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. I think this doesn't need this requires teamwork and common sense, right? Like something very simple approach I would recommend is this. if you have the 5 to 7 process steps mapped out in the white sheet on the or whiteboard in the conference room, you have your stakeholders in there. Let's just imagine you are that salesperson walking from left to right. Imagine going through that together. Walk that through as a team and say, where can this fail? In there, just mark that all up. That's step one. Mark down all the parts that can impact revenue landing for this process. Just write it down.
Mm-hmm.
But Tyler, you and I both know, oh my goodness, we can write down 20 of these, right?
Yeah, I think
Out of these 20, which one makes the biggest impact? In the absence of really, really detailed data to validate that, we don't need that. The key thing is we need consensus on what to work on. Very simple. Take those 20, or just do a quick voting amongst the teams. Or what you can do is put let's simplify. There's 10. We've called out 10 issues. Put those 10 on the Excel sheet and use a very simple prioritization matrix. We can say perceived business impact, high, medium, low, right? Potential implementation costs if we're going to fix it, high, medium, low. And assign high 8, 9, and 10, medium 3 or 4, low 1. And you notice there's a big gap I intentionally did between high and medium because I really want to break out the high ones. Yeah. And the lastly can be CPE, customer and partner impact, high, medium, low, and multiply that through. Here's the thing. If you multiply that through, all the numbers are the same, we haven't done a really good job, really hardcore, brutally prioritizing this. Yeah. Usually it should be 20 or 30% of these 10 have the biggest impact and are the easiest to implement at least. Focus on those. Focus on those. This is a simple, true and try way. And then, build a matrix. You can Google, you can Microsoft Bing it. It's like a prioritization matrix. You'll come up with different ways to help you prioritize, and you put in the factors that's most appropriate for your company, and then multiply. And then once you score them, multiply them through. The highest score wins.
You work on that. You fix it, whatever it is that needs to get done. Yeah. You're about to roll it out, a new process. I'm wondering if you've got any, thoughts on rolling out new processes to the teams. Obviously, there's impacts to sales people or different roles. So.
Yeah. Always start with. I will be the first to say, I have not done this perfectly in the past.
I'm awful at it.
I'm going to loop back to what we talked about earlier, right? Like a method, a concept I mentioned earlier. What is the impact of a solution we're going to deploy to the sales process? What is that impact, right? Impact equals two things. What is the quality of that solution? Does it truly address the root cause in a very effective way? That's quality. But the second part is the acceptance of the salespeople and the stakeholders that needs to actuate it. You miss the second part, you can have a perfect solution right here. It doesn't matter. It's a balance between the two. When we're moving at hyper speed, we do not need a perfect solution, but we need a good, solid, thought-through solution with high acceptance. And I will always err more on the right-hand side. I will balance you, but always err on the people side. When we think about changes, like even talking to my own wife, right? Try to get her to agree to allow me to buy something I'm not allowed to buy. Where is my wife on that change management cycle? Is she hostily against, which happens often? Is she aware? Does she understand why I want that? Is she supportive and committed, right? For a process, especially a sales process that's going to fundamentally impact revenue, the sales folks that have to actuate on that and the internal stakeholders needs to be at the minimum supported level. Better yet, committed. We need to know where they are right now. Are they not even aware? Do they understand? spend the time on that change management. Start with the top, start with the leaders, and put customers and their needs in the center when you start the conversation about this potential change. To drive a natural echo, it needs to start with what is it for them. Like my team runs my team sets quotas, my team pays commissions. I always approach my sales peers with how this can impact the customer, and just as importantly, impact your pay. Start right there, and then the other things will gradually fall in line.
And it sounds like it's a conversation to like probably start earlier rather than later.
Oh,
like, you know, as you don't want to go all the way down to the I've solutioned this, I've built it out, and we're about to roll it out. So 1 week before we push it into production or roll out quotas or anything, I'm going to start. No, you should probably start very early on and kind of build that consensus
yeah,
or acceptance.
You're absolutely right. Very, 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 very great comment. In fact, that earlier we talked about the stakeholders in the sales to help you optimize the sales motion, right? Don't do it yourself. There's no way you or me can know better than they do. Put the outcome in front of everybody, agree to that outcome. This is what we want. This is the impact we want. Work with the area sales vice presidents, have them volunteer a few of their top lieutenants and build the process with them. Build the process with them and prioritize people. Yeah.
Okay, we're getting close on time, but there's one more thing that I want to talk about, and it's just a root cause analysis.
Yeah.
So we have problems, they come up. I never do them because I'm too busy, right? I'm too busy to do this formal review. So I think what would be interesting is, one, talk about what a root cause analysis is and why anybody should really actually care about it. And then the second thing is let's take the lens of somebody that's you're one person or two people in revenue ops or sales ops.
Yeah.
You don't have the you want to throw it off to the side because you don't have the time, but we know that we should be doing it. So is there like a lightweight version of this that we could do?
No. Great question. I think it doesn't need to be a full-blown intensive data analysis with run charts or a super detailed process analysis. Many times we don't have the time for that, right? But one thing I'm a big believer is that we need to spend more time on solutioning than the effort that was spent to create the problem in the first place.
Yeah.
We have to, otherwise the problem doesn't go away, right? There's a very simple way that I've done it in the past. You ever heard the 5 why analysis, the 5 whys?
I probably have, but I don't.
I
don't remember. So let's.
Yeah, it's not the super aggravating one that our little kids, like my little kids, when they were 1, when I said I need why. It's about getting layer to get to the root cause, right? One simple one I used when I was teaching Six Sigma Green Belt classes in the past is that the Washington Monument, has a lot of pigeon residues on it, and as a result, it's eating up the white marble. So they said, why is that happening? Oh, we just got to change. Why is it eroding? Oh, it's because the chemicals required to clean up the residue are so strong to eating the white marble. Oh, we just got to change the chemicals. No, pause right there. Why are pigeons congregating there to relieve themselves on the monuments? When are they doing that? When are they doing that? Oh, they do it in the evening. Why are they doing it in the evening? Oh, it's because I think they're there to catch some bugs. Why are there a lot of bugs? Oh, they're there because a lot of the spiders become much more active at that time. Why are spiders very active at that time? Because the light comes out at this time and the gnats show up.
Yeah.
Gnats show up. So what they did instead of, this is just an example, it's a bit fictional, right? But change the timing when you turn on the evening light at the Washington Monument actually decrease the amount of pigeon residue drastically. So instead of spending all the money replacing all the chemicals, they just change the lighting time. That's an example of 5 why analysis. Just keep digging, peel that onion until a point you're going, I believe this is the root issue. Let's try it. So that's a lightweight example. You don't need to be a Six Sigma whatever built to do that.
This, we are definitely out of time.
Thank you. Thank
I'd
you.
like to think that I'm now a white belt. I think that's the very beginning, which doesn't
Definitely more
exist
than
in
that.
Sigma, but yeah, got a lot of work to do there. Charles, I really appreciate you taking the time today. This has been a really interesting conversation. Is there anything else that you want to add and to summarize before we kind of call it a day?
First of all, thank you. Thank you and your team. All right. And um, all I can say is to my peers in revenue and sales operation and revenue operations, always put customer and your sales folks at the center of our decisions, right? Re-engineer emotion with their needs in the mind, and then build the process in partnership with them and know the metric we're trying to achieve and make a big impact together. And we may not always have the luxury to do that because of time crunch, but do it as much as you sensibly can, and it will make a difference, especially for the customers. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you,
Have a
sir.
wonderful rest of your, I think it's Wednesday.
Yes, yes, it
So
is.
we're almost there. And until next time, everybody. See
All
ya.
right. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.